My name is Tamara Greer. I am the Access Services Coordinator here at the library. I am the person who puts these events together. If you have any technical questions, please let us know. If you can't hear anything, please let us know. I think we've got everybody's contact information now, so we'll make sure that everybody gets credit. If you have specific instructors who we're offering credit for this, you can also drop that in the chat and I'll make sure that we get that sent to them as well. Otherwise, our library director, Gina Cash, is going to be the one who's actually going to be talking to you about the APA. So take it away, Gina.
Hi, everyone. If you can jump in, unmute, or put in the chat box, what classes are you taking that you're using APA Citation? Most logical one would be psychology, but honors capstone, okay. Early childhood education. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. Ooh. My camera went away. That scared me for a moment there. Okay. So right now you should see the library's homepage inside of CougarNet. And so I want to show you how to get to a guide that we're going to be using today to introduce you to APA style. So from the library's page here, I'm going to scroll down and we have a guide called the Citation Guide under this heading Citation Help. So if I click on that, this is a place where we've gathered together guides for all different types of styles that are used at Cleveland State. So not just APA, this is where you can go find information on MLA, CSE, Chicago, and Journal of Wildlife Management. Under each one, we have several different websites listed that provide information about that particular style. And we've tried to list them in the order of what we think of as probably the most beneficial or most accessible. And so in this case with APA, I'm going to go ahead and start with the guide that I actually created. So the Cleveland State APA Style Guide. Okay. APA stands for American Psychological Association. And so it is the style that's used by psychology classes, sociology, I believe philosophy, early childhood education, nursing, and business on our campus are just some of the ones that use APA style. And the style was developed essentially by publishers so that anyone publishing in those fields would format their papers the same, would cite their sources the same. So it was really easy for anyone in those fields to pick up an article and navigate it. They could identify the sources. They knew where to look for the abstract versus the result. So it's just meant to set these guidelines and to make sure that everyone's paper is uniform. Okay, unfortunately, while that's easier for the reader, it's not always easier for the writer because you are having to meet all of these very specific guidelines. When I think of citation style, I used to teach composition and I always compared it, it's more mathematical in that you have formulas and you plug the information into the formulas and there is actually a right and wrong, whereas with writing, there's a little bit more leeway there, usually. Okay, so that's what APA style is. This guide that I put together covers the most common questions that you'll have. So the most common types of sources and how to cite in text and in your references page. Sometimes you're going to find sources that are unusual, especially if you're dealing with online sources, in which case we do have a copy of the print version of the publication manual of the APA. And so this will cover everything. That doesn't mean that you have to come to the library to look at the book. If you have questions at any point about APA style and you can't find an answer in our guide, get in contact with one of your librarians and we can answer that question for you. We'll go to the guide if we need to. So you have our contact information here from the guide. Okay, why do we use APA besides making sure that everyone's paper looks the same and we have kind of a standard view? It's also to make sure that we acknowledge our sources. So why do we cite sources? There are several reasons. First of all, giving credit where it's due. If you're using somebody else's ideas, you want to acknowledge their work. It strengthens your position as a writer. You've consulted experts, pulled together this data, and so you want to use that to establish your credibility as a writer. The better sources you use, the more reliable you are as a writer. If you've got an audience who's looking at your article and they find it really interesting, they may want to do further research on that particular topic. So say, for example, if you did something in an early childhood education class and one of your classmates was like, that's a really interesting topic, and I have a psychology paper or assignment that I could do something similar, they can use your citations to help them get started in the research process. Similarly, if you're doing research and you find a source that's really useful, you can look at their citations and go to their sources. So it's a very easy way to gather a lot of sources very quickly if you find one that you really like. Effective use of citations. If you can effectively use citations, you avoid plagiarism. And so I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead here. What is plagiarism? And that's essentially presenting the words, ideas, also images of another person as your own. So you're not giving them credit for something that is their work product. I know we often think about this in terms of words. So you quote directly from someone and forget to give them credit, but it's a little more complicated than that. It's also ideas and images. So if you're doing a PowerPoint presentation and you bring in an image from a website, you need to give credit for that. So what happens to you at Cleveland State if you're charged with plagiarism? And plagiarism can be intentional, but it can also be unintentional. You're not aware of what you need to cite. That's why we have these workshops, to make you aware, to make sure that you won't get caught unintentionally plagiarizing something. At Cleveland State, you essentially will get an F for the exercise that in which you plagiarized. In extreme cases, you may also end up getting an F for the course. So it's important that when your instructors tell you to do a research paper, to use sources, that you know what citation style you need to use, and that you get help if you need it with that citation style. My my rule for a citation is, when in doubt, I always just go ahead and include the citation. It can be cumbersome sometimes, but I prefer to oversight rather than undercite. Okay, when am I citing sources? Like I said, anytime you're quoting someone, that's an easy one. Anytime you're paraphrasing somebody's ideas, so you're putting it into your own words. And this you need to be careful with, because if you have a sentence from a source and you just change a couple of the words using synonyms, that's not paraphrasing, that's technically quoting. So unless you're putting it into your own words with a new sentence structure, it's best to probably just go ahead and quote the source material, especially if it's a short phrase. So quoting, paraphrasing, so using someone else's ideas in your word, and also using others' images or videos. You need to make sure you cite it. Okay. Before we go further into the topic of citations in APA, I want to talk about the formatting of your paper in APA, because that's where you're going to start, just setting up your paper. This has changed a little bit. So if you've used APA format in the past, this may look a little different. They've actually made it easier on students. So now there's two different versions, one for professionals who are looking to publish and one for students. And so this in front of you, what you're seeing is what your title page should look like in the new APA format. And so we've got the key components labeled here, your page number in the upper right-hand corner. Unlike with MLA, which you may have used for one of your English classes or in high school, you don't have your last name as well as the page number. It's just the page number. And the pagination starts on the title page. So actually the body of the paper is going to start on page 2. As you'll notice here, the only thing that stands out as kind of unusual is the title. And that is because there's extra space between it and the name, the author name, and it's also in bold, and we have the keywords in the title capitalized. And this is very rare in APA style for you to do anything like that. So we're really drawing attention to our title here. We have the extra space, otherwise everything else is double spaced. And you're going to include the same information on any type of assignment, unless your instructor tells you otherwise. Sometimes your instructors will have very specific information they want on the title page, so always check with your instructor. But here we have the author name, the department, so it might be early childhood education or psychology or nursing, the school, so Cleveland State, the title of the course, including the course number, your instructor's name, and the date, the due date, instead of the date that you're actually writing it. Hopefully those are two different dates and not the same date, but sometimes that happens. Okay, so you have this visual model here, but we also have an explanation down below of what this thing looks like. When we get into the body of the paper, we're once again going to see our page number in the upper right-hand corner, and we're going to see our title again. So you can just copy and paste from the front page. It's centered, and once again, keywords are capitalized and it is in bold. And we immediately go into the introduction of the body of the paper. And as you'll notice here, unlike on the first page, it's all double spaced. And from this point on, from the top of page 2 on, everything is going to be double spaced. You're never going to have extra spaces between paragraphs. You won't have extra spaces to set aside block quotes. You're not going to have extra spaces in your references page. So once you get to page 2, use your word processor to set line spacing as double space, and you're good to go for the rest of your paper. Okay, other things about APA style. You're going to use the same font throughout. Usually that's going to be an 11 or 12 point font. And so I've listed here some acceptable font styles. Sometimes your instructor will say it has to be 12 point Times New Roman. That used to be the standard. Everyone had to use 12 point Times New Roman, whether it's MLA or APA. So check on that with your instructor to see if they have a preference. 1-inch margins on all sides. And those are easy to set up in your word processor. That should be the default in Google Docs and in Word, is 1-inch margins on all sides. I know I used to have students that would get creative with that, and they would fudge it a little bit, and then there were some that had like 2-inch margins all the way around. It's very easy to see, so make sure that you follow that guideline. With the exception of the references page, everything is going to be flush with the left-hand margin. You'll indent your paragraphs 1/2 inch, and then on the right-hand side, it's what we call ragged, in that you're not going to use that feature in your word processor to make it a perfect block of text. It will run as far as it can run to the end of the line, and then it will automatically go to the next line. So this is the ragged right-hand margin. Okay, references page, of course, at the end of your paper, it's going to be on a separate page. So even if your last page of the body of your paper ends like a few lines on the top of a page, you're going to go ahead and break for a new page. Even though you are breaking for a new page, the pagination continues. So I would assume that this paper had a title page, 1 page, then pages 2 through 9, body of the paper, and then page 10 is the references page. As with the body of the paper here, you have the title, references, it's centered and it's in bold. If you have just one source, it'll just be reference, so it'll be a reference page. As with the rest of the paper, we have our 12-point font here. I use Times New Roman, and we've got double spacing throughout. Where this is different than the body of the paper is that we don't use a standard paragraph format. We use what's called the hanging indent. And so the first line of your paragraph or your entry is going to be flush with the left-hand margin, and all the subsequent lines will be indented like you would with a normal paragraph. And there are ways to do that very easily using Docs or using Word or Google Docs. And so if you don't know how to do that, your instructor, that's one of those things that they can show you, or anyone in the library or the Tutoring and Learning Center can also show you how to find that tool. It used to be a nightmare back in the day with the typewriter when you had to get all of this spacing correct by return and tab, 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 tab. So make use of the resources available to you through your word processing software. Okay, another thing about the references page that I want to point out while we are here is that the entries are in alphabetical order by the author's last name or by whatever appears first in the citation. As you can see here, we have author names. We also have a corporate author. So instead of having an individual author, this was published by the American Psychological Association. There will be cases where you don't have an author name at all. And so what will appear first here is the title of the article, in which case you're going to alphabetize it by the first keyword in that title. So you wouldn't use the, but whatever came next would be. So like if this was a title and we didn't have an author name, a pilot study, that would fall under the P's. Okay, that essentially is an overview of formatting in APA. It's pretty much set in stone. It's easy to follow. Everything is outlined here and you have a visual guide. But do any of you have any questions about formatting before we move along? Okay, let's jump into the harder portion of this, which is the citation portion of it. And so citations in APA consist of two components. You have the in-text citation. So at the point in your text, when you're quoting, paraphrasing, or summarizing the source using somebody else's ideas, you acknowledge it there. But we don't want to include all of the information you need in a citation because that would detract from being able to read your paper, read through it. So we want to include just enough information that we can match it to the full citation on the references page. So every time you use a parenthetical citation, there should be a corresponding citation, full citation on the references page. I know with comp students, I used to find it was really easy for me to spot when they had accidentally plagiarized because there would be a citation in the paper, but no corresponding citation at the end, or they would be citing a source on the references page and it isn't referred to anywhere in the text. And so make sure that those two correspond. They should be one for one. Okay, so like I said, you have your in-text citation and the corresponding full citation on the references page. We're going to start with the in-text citations. There are three key components to any in-text citation. And if you've used MLA before, there are two key components. So in MLA, you have the author's last name and the page numbers where the information came from in the source. We add a component when we're talking about APA, and that is publication year. And that's because with these fields, nursing, psychology, sociology, early childhood education, it's important that we use the most recent information possible. And we want to make sure that it's up to date. And so we include that information to let our readers know we're using the most up-to-date information. If I'm through a psychology paper and I see reference to something that was published in 1950, that's going to set off little warning bells for me. So we want that publication year there. Each of the elements of this in-text citation are separated by a comma. And they're always going to fall in the same order. So author, year, page number. Unlike in MLA, we do actually indicate page number with the letter P period. If we have more than one page, so we're paraphrasing for 2 or more pages, we indicate that with PP period, and then the range 28 to 29, as you can see there. Okay, so this is your ideal standard citation. With a lot of sources, you're not going to have all of these pieces of information. Like I said before, you could have a source that has a corporate author or no author. There are sources out there where you won't have a publication year, especially when you're dealing with websites, for example. And then of course, with a lot of electronic sources, you're not going to have a page number. So what do you do in those cases? Kind of outlined examples of all of those bizarre or unusual situations here. So we have what you need to do if you have more than one author. So if it's two authors, as you can see here, you're combining with the ampersand. So you'll include both authors' last names. If you've got three or more authors, instead of continuing to list out names, which would take up a lot of space and detract from our ability to read the paper, we use an abbreviation, ETAL, which means and others. So at this point, we don't know, it could be 3 authors, it could be 20 authors. We have to look at the references page to find that. If you don't have an author, you're going to use a shortened form of the title of whatever the item is. So as you can see here, if it's an article, chapter, or web page, the title will be in quotation marks and it's abbreviated. It's not going to be the whole thing. If you're dealing with a book, it's going to be in italics. So you can tell the difference within the text of what type of source you're dealing with. If you're dealing with a corporate author, like I said, American Psychological Association, you don't want to have to write that out every single time within the body of your paper. So the first time you will, and then in brackets, you're going to put whatever the acronym is for that association. So APA in this case. And then from that point forward, you just have to type APA. In some cases, you're going to refer to more than one source in a sentence or in a phrase. And so you need to acknowledge both of those sources. And so this shows you here exactly how you would go about doing that. You're essentially going to include the regular parenthetical citation and join the two by a semicolon. And this is a little unusual here. You're going to list them in alphabetical order. So even though you may have used the information from Smith first in your sentence and then followed by dinosaur in a haystack, you want to alphabetize them. And that'll be alphabetized by whatever appears first in the parenthetical citation. There are going to be cases when you find information in a source that is quoted from another source. So in this case, I've said, you're reading a work by Lion, but Lion is quoting Rabbit, and you want to use Rabbit's words in your text. In an ideal world, you would then go and find Rabbit's text and find that quote and then be able to use that, but that's not always possible and it takes a bit of time. So instead, you can use this format here. We've given the Rabbit citation, which you find in the Lion's references page, and then as cited in, and then we're citing also the parenthetical citation for the source that we're actually reading. Okay. So we've dealt with all of the different variations of authors, multiple authors, no authors, organization as authors. The next thing we want to look at is when you don't have a publication date, and this will be actually fairly common when you're dealing with websites. Instead of just skipping on to the page number, we're going to use the abbreviation N period D period, which of course stands for no date. We have no date, and so we'll fill that gap in the citation. Sometimes, actually, this is one of those cases where it depends on your instructor's preference. You can also, in some cases, just go ahead and skip it. So that's one of those where you want to ask your instructor, would you prefer that I use N period D period, or just skip that and go on to the page numbers? I know in the old system, we didn't use ND, and so some instructors still prefer not to use that. Okay, if we have an author and a publication date, but no page numbers, we simply leave that off at the end. I will say, as someone who does a lot of research in our databases, if you're using a library source, always choose the PDF version if available. PDF versions tend to have the page numbers on the source, unlike what you see on the page. So if PDF is available, that's what you want to use so that you can get that information. Your instructor really appreciates it, especially if you are quoting directly from a source, if you have the page number. Okay, when do you not use a full parenthetical citation? You won't use it if you include some of the information from the parenthetical citation in the sentence. For example, if you include the author's name in your sentence, so Webster Stratton described, etc. Anytime you use the author name in the sentence, you're also going to go ahead and include the year of publication at that point, immediately following the name, and you'll put it in parentheses. So this item was published in 2016, and then at the end, you'll have your page numbers. So once again, if you include the author's name in the sentence, you also include the year in the sentence. And what falls at the end will be the page numbers. Okay, at the bottom of the page, I know I've covered a lot of crazy information, a lot of weird circumstances, but there will be cases where I haven't covered some particular situation that you might run into with a source. That's where you're going to go to these other additional resources for additional information, or contact us at the library and we will try to resolve those issues for you. When you're dealing with web sources or you're dealing with non-traditional sources like social media or videos, these can become complicated. Okay, before we jump into the references page, are there any questions about parenthetical citations? Okay, most of our guide here is actually devoted to the references page. It doesn't say references page here, but citing books, articles, online sources, and other source types, that's all referring to how you cite sources on the references page. And I've broken it down by source type. For most of your classes, you're going to be dealing with books and articles. And articles is further broken down to journal, magazine, newspaper articles, a little bit different. Online sources, of course, primarily websites, and then other source types, we're talking about videos or photos or social media posts. So I'm going to spend the most time on these two because they're the most common, and then I will point out some information on these two. So citing books. A book citation in a perfect world will include the author name, publication date, title, and source. And source at this point just means publisher name. Okay, I'm seeing we have chat. I want to go ahead and check and see what's going on in chat. Can you tell me what that is, Tamara? Because I can't see it.
I don't see anything. So if you sent something directly to Gina, if you could send it to me or put it in the chat so everyone can see it.
Okay, it's not flashing anymore, so.
It's messing with you.
Yes, it is. Okay, so elements of a book citation here. You should be able to get all of this information from the title page of the book. It should include all of this. Sometimes if you have a piece missing, and most likely it's going to be publication date or maybe the source, if you flip over to the back side of the title page, you'll be able to find all the publication information there. And so that's where you can find your date and your press name. Sometimes you're going to see multiple presses listed, in which case you want to go with whatever's listed first, whatever press is identified first. Okay, so when it comes to the citation, one of the quirks of APA style is that we never write out the author's full name. We use the last name, comma, first name initial, and middle name initial. And of course, if you don't have a middle name, then you'll just have the one initial. Not sure why they do that. I think maybe they were trying to save space at some point and make it easier on themselves, but that is one of the quirks of APA. When it comes to listing the authors here, it's kind of tempting, like you did in the parenthetical citations, to list them in alphabetical order, but you don't want to do that. Whatever author is listed first on the title page or on the article, that author is going to be listed first here as well. The reason they're listed first on the source is because they were the principal author. So they did more work on the source. And so they get like top billing like you would in a movie. So they're listed like you would in a movie of this is the main character and these are minor characters playing different roles. And so use the exact same orders you see in the paper. When it comes to the title of a book, this is another place that it differs from a lot of citation styles. You don't capitalize all the keywords in the title. The only words that you're going to capitalize, of course, are proper nouns, the first letter of the title, and the first letter after a colon. Otherwise, it's all lowercase. The way that you make this stand out is that you're going to italicize. And this is, once again, just books, italicizing the title of a book. And then, of course, we have our publisher name here. So an example of what that would look like. And of course, then we have our weird situations. What do I do if I don't have an author? Two authors. This one is a little much, but anywhere from 3 up to 20 authors, you have to list them all out. And I've unfortunately been in a case where I had to list out 16 authors, which was really annoying. With science papers, sometimes you have so many authors. You do have to list them all out up to 20. The one nice thing though is you're not writing out the full name, you're using the initials for the first and middle name. And you continue to use that same format, last name, initial, initial, last name, initial, initial. Okay, once again, organization is author. In some cases, you're going to have a book that has an editor, but it doesn't have an author, so somebody's been collecting different pieces together, or they've edited a book that was published long ago. And so this is the format for acknowledging the editor. In some case, you will have editors and authors. If you just have an editor, editor gets top billing. If you have an editor and author, the author gets top billing, and the editor gets pushed a little bit further in after the title. You could be dealing with a book that has more than one edition. And if you've been asked to use your textbook as a source, most likely you will have more than one edition. So you need to include that information, and you'll do it in parentheses within the citation after the title of the book. You may also find yourself citing just a chapter in a book instead of the entire book. And so you have to do the title of the chapter, author of the chapter, then you may have an author for the book as well, and the book title. So there are lots of factors that come into play here, and it's going to be on a source by source basis. In an ideal world, you're going to have one author and you're going to have all the information that you need, but that's actually fairly unusual. So go to these, look at them. You have the model here, which you can use to plug your information into. Then you also have an example to show you what that should look like. If we scroll down at the bottom, once again, if there's something that isn't covered here, you have additional sources. One note that I want to put in here, ebooks. Ebooks are increasingly popular. And APA, you used to have to include a URL for an ebook to acknowledge the difference between a print book and an ebook. We no longer do that. So the citation for an ebook is going to look exactly like the citation for a print book. Some instructors are not happy about that change. And so your instructor may tell you, I want you to include the URL if it is an ebook. So make sure you ask your instructor what they prefer. Articles. I've broken it down into different source types here. So you have journal articles, magazine articles, and newspaper articles. And where they primarily differ is going to be in whether or not you have a volume and issue number, and then how much information you include about publication date. For journals, you just want the year. The journal may tell you it was published in August 2006, or it may even tell you that it was published September 21st of 2006. All we want is the year in the citation. Magazines, you're going to include as much information as you can provide. Same with newspapers, because they're published more frequently. It's important that you include year, month, day, if available. Okay, let's scroll back up here. Key elements of an article citation: author, publication date information, title of the article, and title of the source. So the article has its title, then the title of the journal, magazine, or newspaper as well. Volume and issue numbers. Some things you won't have that information, some you may only have a volume. Page numbers, and this thing here, the DOI. It should be DOI/URL. A DOI is a digital object identifier, and it's going to look like a URL. You can see an example right here. But this is a new thing that they're doing. It's essentially like a social security number that's been applied to a source. So it's a unique number, but it's, so if I am a student at a school in Japan and I have a DOI number, I can search that on Google or Naver or whatever I'm using, and I will find the source. Whereas if I have a URL and the author has used a URL from Cleveland State Community College, for example, and I'm in another country, that URL may not work for me, but the DOI number will. So if a DOI is available, you always use that. And so that's outlined here. You know, there are cases where you won't have a DOI, like if it's truly from an online search engine. So you've used a source that you found on Google or Bing, you're not going to have a DOI, so you will automatically use your URL. Okay, the library source that's most common is a journal. And so here's your standard format for that. You have your title of your article. Important thing to point out here is that you do not capitalize all of the keywords in the title, just the first letter. Then you have the title of the journal. And here you do capitalize the keywords. There's nothing to distinguish the title of articles. There's no quotation marks, there's no italics, you don't underline it, but you are going to italicize the title of the journal. The same thing's going to happen with magazines and newspapers. We have a volume number, and it's weird here because the volume is also going to be italicized, but the issue number won't be. And they actually abut each other. So it's 38, there's not a space, parentheses, 9 in parentheses. And so the 38 is italicized and the 9 is not. We have our pages, and exactly like in our parenthetical citation, it will either be P or the double P's with the page range. And then our DOI, if we have that information. Okay, I'm not going to go through magazine and articles because it's essentially the same. It's just that you may have slightly different information, especially in regards to data publication. We have all of our variables again. So 2 authors, 3, organization, no author. And once again, if there are unusual circumstances, we have our additional resources. What's nice about the databases, the library databases, is most of them have a citation tool where you can click on it and it's going to automatically generate a citation for you. Unfortunately, they sometimes will make mistakes because it is computer generated and nobody has edited that. So that is going to be your responsibility. And so once you have those citations from the databases, you want to come here and make sure that everything is in the correct order and that everything is formatted correctly. So is the right thing sized, is the right thing capitalized? And so that's what these are here for, to help you with that editing process. Some instructors are fairly lackadaisical about these types of things. Other instructors, you know, one comma out of place or one thing not italicized that should be italicized, and they're going to count off points. So I think it's better to just use the guide and be as scrupulous with your editing as you possibly can. Citing online sources. Author, publication date, page title, site name, and URL. It's very rare to get a web page that includes all of this information. And so you just do the best you can with the information that you're given. And it's probably going to take you a bit of time to look around, dig around on the site. Of course, you're going to look at the top of the page, but something may be hidden down at the very bottom of the page. Oftentimes, if there's like a publication date, it's going to appear at the very bottom. Or if you're using an article on a site, the information about the article will actually be on the website's main page rather than on the page dedicated to the article. So just know that while websites are really lovely to use because they're easy to find and there are so many of them easily available. When it comes to citation, that's where things become a little bit more difficult. We have, once again, our standard format and then our different unusual circumstances. The one that I want to point out here that's added to the mix is Wikipedia. I know some instructors say no Wikipedia, but if you are allowed to use Wikipedia in a paper, it has its own format here. And so make sure that you're aware that this exists. I also want to point out the Online Media APA Style blog. Okay, so here I didn't list all of these out, but Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, Twitter, if you're using any kind of social media in your paper, and I know for FYS, for example, you do, you can click in here. It will give you an example of what that looks like, what information needs to be included, and also parenthetical citation, what needs to be included. Finally, other source types. These are becoming increasingly common, so audiovisual information, reference information, dissertations, statutes, so government reports. You may decide that you want to interview someone for a history paper. And so how do you cite that? Or you may want to cite somebody else's presentation. We have TED Talks, we have transcripts, podcasts. All of these have a very specific citation style. And instead of trying to list these exhaustive examples on this guide, because you'll less frequently run across these, if you click on any of these, I'm going to click reference list other print sources. This will go through and break down those different types of sources for you. I tried to list as best as possible what's covered in that particular source. So audiovisual media, this is kind of the best site for finding out information about that. So if you wanted to cite a TED Talk, that's what it's going to look like. If you need help figuring out what format to use, or if you're looking at a website and you can't find any of the information you need for a citation, please do come to us and ask. Ask your instructor, ask someone from the Tutoring and Learning Center. We will help you figure that out, what needs to be in your citation. And there have been cases in the past where I wasn't able to fully answer that question, and I actually emailed the instructor to let them know, okay, this is the citation that we agreed upon. And so if there are questions, you can come to me instead of the student necessarily. So, so make use of all of the resources available to you. Okay, there's a lot of detail, but that is essentially APA style. Paper formatting, in-text citations, and references page. Are there any questions? Okay. Just make sure, use the tools available to you. So use those citation generators in our databases, but then also use that guide. Make sure that they conform with standard guidelines, and also always look at your instructor's assignment sheet or policy statement or whatever they have where they may outline their specific preferences. I think that's what I have for today. Although I'm kind of the APA person in the library, any of us working at the front desk in the library on the references side, and Tamara as well, can answer your references question, and not just APA, MLA, Chicago, and CSE and wildlife management. We're not as proficient in those, but we can get you in touch with somebody who can help you with those as well. So thank you all for joining us today. Once again, if you have any questions about anything that was covered, do go to the library's webpage, chat with us, email us, call us, drop by the front desk. Turning things back over to Tamara.
And I'm just going to point out one more thing, and then you guys can be on your way for the day. This is the main Cougar Nets page. If we go out to library, we get a login. Of course we do. because that's just the way my day is running today. Okay, so let's try this one more time. Here is the library page. Well, there it goes. If you came into the workshop today late, if you want to go back over something that Gina was talking about, it's not going to be there right now, obviously, because we're doing it right now. But if you look in the next couple of days, you can go down here to our subject guides. And then you can go scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. Okay, and you can go to library events and citation workshops. And over here at APA, you will find a video. This is the one we did yesterday. So we did our MLA yesterday, and you'll see there's now an MLA workshop video there. In a couple of days, we'll have the one for APA out there, and you can brush up on whatever you need to brush up on. And again, contact us, contact us, contact us. Here is all of our ways that you can contact us if you have any questions. So thank you all for showing up today. And I hope you learned something and have a great afternoon.